My mother blamed and resented me for my father's near-fatal accident. Even upon my father's death, I remained a thorn in her side. I've always known my life wasn't going to be the kind you see in feel-good movies. Adopted into a family where the age gap could easily fit another generation between us, I was the anomaly at family gatherings, the young face among wrinkled smiles, the boy in a world of history I could barely relate to. My dad, born in 1927, was a World War II veteran, a man whose silence told stories his words never could. My mom, a decade his junior, carried a gentleness eroded by time, and a deafness on her left side that made her world as lopsided as her hearing. I was 34 now, reflecting on a slice of my life from about 15 years ago that had shifted the course of my relationship with them, especially with my mom. That period became a chasm that widened with time, filled with silence, misunderstandings. The incident that set everything off was as mundane as it was tragic. It happened one night when the comfort of sleep was abruptly replaced by a startling thump from my dad's room. In the haze of half-sleep I reasoned it away as one of our animals knocked something over, or perhaps my dad, in his nightly bathroom ritual, had accidentally dropped his cane. I rolled over, choosing the warmth of my bed over investigating. That decision would haunt me for years. Morning light brought the harsh reality crashing down. My nephew's scream pierced the usual quiet, a sound so filled with terror that it catapulted me from my bed. Rushing into my dad's room, the scene before me was one I'd replay over countless times. My dad, lying beside his bed, a blanket wrapped tightly around his neck, his skin turning a worrying shade of blue. Adrenaline kicked in. I managed to lift him back onto the bed, unwrapping the blanket from around his neck, his breath shallow and labored. The call to the ambulance was a blur, as was their arrival and the subsequent rush to the hospital. The layout of our house, something so ordinary, became a detail of contention, a piece of the puzzle in the blame that was cast my way. My room was adjacent to my father's, a fact that somehow was supposed to arm me with the ability to foresee and prevent the accident. Half asleep, my mind did not leap to disaster. It didn't occur to me that my father could fall out of bed despite his health issues. After his third stroke, my adoptive parents made the difficult decision to sleep in separate bedrooms. His mobility was impaired, and she needed her rest to be able to care for him during the day. This arrangement, while practical, created an unintended isolation for my father. His room was upstairs, while my mother's was directly below. That night, as fate would have it, my adoptive mother was turned onto her good ear, her deaf side exposed to the ceiling, and thus to any sounds that might have come from my father's room above. She didn't hear the fall, just as I didn't. Her deafness on her left side was not something new. We had all adapted to it in various ways over the years. Yet, in the aftermath, it felt like a cruel irony that neither of us heard the one sound that mattered most. The guilt of that night weighed heavily on me. The what-ifs haunted my thoughts. What if I had been fully awake? It was as if my proximity to my father's room that night endowed me with a responsibility I was unaware I had, a guard duty I failed. Following the incident, my dad's health spiraled, leading to his admission to an old folks' home for veterans. The air in our home thickened with tension, as if every word and gesture were filtered through a lens of blame. My mother, her grief manifesting as anger, directed her fury towards me, the convenient target for her swirling storm of emotions. It didn't matter that the fall was an accident, a tragic twist of fate that I, in my half-asleep state, could not have foreseen or prevented. In her eyes, I was the culprit, the reason her husband, my adoptive father, now lay in a bed at the old folks' home for veterans, his robust spirit dimmed. The initial conflict was a crack in the dam of our family dynamics, releasing a flood of long-suppressed frustrations and resentments. My mother's blame became the soundtrack of my life at home, a constant reminder of that night. Conversations were minefields. Each word I said weighed and found wanting, each silence loaded with accusation. The more she blamed, the more I withdrew, retreating into a shell of indifference to protect myself from the pain of her words. The moment I decided to join the army felt like the first step toward something new, a path that was entirely mine. But that dream quickly became entangled in the web of my family's expectations and my mother's fear of being left alone. My mother, wielding her grief like a weapon, saw my departure not as a young man's quest for his own path, but as abandonment. After filling out the necessary forms, ready to embark on this new journey, my mother took matters into her own hands in a way that left me stunned and betrayed. She spoke to the army recruiter, a conversation I was not privy to, but the consequences of which I felt deeply. My mother told them I had changed my mind about joining, that I couldn't go through with it. Her words, authoritative and final, painted a picture of doubt and indecision that was entirely hers, not mine. It was a deliberate act, one rooted in her desperation to keep me close, to ensure I remained at home to take care of my father. The realization that my mother would go to such lengths to keep me anchored to home, to a role she deemed suitable, was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The betrayal of that act, her going behind my back to alter the course of my future, strained our relationship even further. It was a clear sign that my desires, my aspirations, were secondary to her need to keep the family unit intact, regardless of the cost to my own dreams and autonomy. Faced with the collapse of my plans and the unbearable atmosphere at home, I made a decision that would set the course of my life for the next few years. College, a backup plan I had never intended to use, became my lifeline. The acceptance letter from a university 200 miles away was my ticket out of the stifling environment of blame and resentment. I packed my life into a few boxes, not knowing when or if I would return, driven by a desperate need for space and a fresh start. Life away from home was a stark contrast to what I had known. College presented a world of opportunities and challenges, but the freedom it afforded came with its own set of difficulties. The shadow of my family's turmoil followed me, a cloud that darkened even the brightest days. To support myself and avoid the need to return home, I took on 2 jobs, juggling academics and work in a relentless cycle that left little room for rest or reflection. Balancing work and school wasn't easy, but it became my new normal. The campus library was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could lose myself among the stacks of books and the quiet hum of students studying. Here, I wasn't the son blamed for his father's accident. I was just another student, trying to make ends meet and build a future. The job required meticulous attention to detail, sorting, shelving, and ensuring that the library remained a place of order and learning. It was a quiet, steady job that contrasted sharply with the chaos of my personal life. The local cafe, on the other hand, was a bustling hub of activity. Here, I was a barista, a friendly face behind the counter crafting lattes and cappuccinos for a stream of customers. The pace was relentless, the environment lively and sometimes overwhelming. Yet there was joy in the rush, in the smiles of satisfied customers, and in the camaraderie with my coworkers. This job taught me resilience, the ability to keep smiling even when I was tired, and to find peace in the rhythm of the work. These jobs, while exhausting, provided me with a sense of purpose. They were my escape from the turmoil back home, a way to prove to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet. The satisfaction of earning my own way, of being responsible for my successes and failures, was empowering. Amidst the long hours and the tired evenings, I found moments of happiness and pride. Being busy, immersing myself in work and school, helped me to momentarily forget the bitterness of the past, allowing me to focus on building a new future for myself. Yet, the question of my departure, of whether my actions had been justified or selfish, remained unanswered, a puzzle I was still working to solve. The emotional toll of separation and blame was heavier than I anticipated. The physical distance from my family did little to ease the burden of guilt and unresolved anger. I missed my father, the man who had, in his quiet way, been a source of strength and stability. My mother's accusations echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the rift that had grown between us. I found myself questioning my decisions, wondering if I had indeed been the jerk for choosing to leave, for putting distance between myself and the family drama. After graduation, I landed a stable job, the kind that felt both like a triumph and a compromise. It was a steady climb away from the tumultuous past into a semblance of adult life, marked by paychecks and small freedoms. The rare trips back home were exercises in tension, the air thick with unspoken recriminations, and the heavy presence of my mother's enduring blame. It wasn't that I didn't want to see my father, it was the opposite. My heart ached for the man who seemed to shrink a little more with each passing day, his vitality sapped by illness and the domestic strife that buzzed around him like an unrelenting swarm. Driven by a mix of guilt and love, I set a new goal for myself: to earn enough money to afford the best possible treatment for my father. It became an obsession, this idea that financial success could somehow translate into a redemption of sorts, a way to make amends for my perceived failings. My career became more than just a job, it was a means to an end, each promotion, each raise a step closer to providing my father with the care he deserved. The irony of working tirelessly to support someone who, through no fault of their own, felt like a stranger, wasn't lost on me. Despite my attempts to heal and move forward, the news of my father's passing knocked me back to square one. That night I received a call at an hour so late, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. It was my aunt on the other end, her voice steady but laced with an unmistakable sorrow. "It's about your dad," she said, and in that instant, I felt the ground beneath me shift. My father had passed away after a prolonged illness, an event we all saw looming on the horizon, yet hoped would somehow steer clear of our shores. I was hundreds of miles away, wrapped in the cocoon of my new life, far from the home that felt more like a battleground than a sanctuary in recent years. The pain of the news was a sharp jab to the gut, a mix of grief and guilt swirling in a tempest I couldn't contain. My relationship with my family, particularly with my mom, had been strained at best, severed at worst. Yet, the finality of my father's departure cut through those tangled feelings, reminding me that beneath the resentment and misunderstandings there was love, raw, unfiltered love for the man who, though not of my blood, had been a pillar in my life. I didn't have time to pack. There was no moment to sit and ponder what to bring. The urgency of the situation propelled me forward, my actions driven by a singular need to get back as quickly as possible. The bus was the first mode of transportation I could find, a decision made not out of convenience but desperation. I boarded at dawn, the early morning light casting long shadows that mirrored the heaviness in my heart. The journey was a blur, each mile stretching on as I grappled with the reality of my father's death and the inevitable confrontation with my family. I rehearsed conversations in my head, anticipated accusations and prepared defenses, all the while battling the growing knot of sorrow for the loss of a man who had shaped so much of who I had become. Arriving at the funeral home, the gravity of the situation finally settled in. I saw him there, lying in repose, a tranquility on his face that had eluded him in his final years. My father looked at peace, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. The sight of him, so still and serene, broke through the walls I had built around my heart. The grievances that once seemed insurmountable now appeared petty in the face of such profound loss. My eyes traced the lines of his face, each wrinkle a testament to the life he had lived, the battles he had fought, and the love he had given, however imperfectly. Standing before him, I was acutely aware of the finality of death, how it leaves no room for apologies, for mending fences, for saying all the things left unsaid. The weight of my unresolved feelings towards my family, my mother's harsh words, and the guilt of my perceived negligence crushed me. In that moment, I wished for nothing more than to turn back time, to relive those last days with the knowledge of their fleeting nature, to offer words of love instead of silence. My father's passing was a great loss, a void that would never be filled. Yet it also served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of forgiveness, understanding, and compassion. As I stood there, amidst the somber faces of those who had known and loved him, I realized that holding on to anger and resentment served no purpose but to prolong the pain. In that moment, all I felt was the piercing ache of missing a man who had been more than just a father figure. He had been a guide, a confidant, and, in his own way, a source of unwavering support. Standing at the end of the somber line, I extended my hand, offering a quiet, "Thank you," to each person who had come to pay their respects to my father. The room was filled with a heavy silence, punctuated only by soft murmurs and the occasional shuffle of feet. It was a moment of closure, a final goodbye to a man who had been a constant in my life, despite our complexities and the distance that had grown between us. But that silence shattered when my mother's voice, sharp and laden with grief and accusation, pierced the air. "His death is partly due to him," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. "He's a cruel person for ignoring his father, a selfish person for going to college and not taking care of his family." Her words, like daggers, cut through the solemn atmosphere, turning heads and drawing a collective breath from the gathered mourners. The accusation was a blow, not because it was new but because of its public nature and the timing. It was a reopening of wounds that had never fully healed, a reminder of the years of blame and misunderstanding that had driven a wedge between us. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. It was her initial accusations that had pushed me away, that had made me feel like an outsider in my own home. And now, as we stood together in grief, she chose to resurrect those accusations, to paint me as a villain in the eyes of those who had come to mourn my father. I felt my heart break all over again, not just for the loss of my father, but for the loss of what our family could have been. The sadness was overwhelming, a tide of emotion that threatened to pull me under. I had come to say goodbye, to find some semblance of peace in the wake of my father's passing. But instead, I was met with public condemnation from the one person whose acceptance I had longed for. The eyes of the guests were on me, some filled with sympathy, others with judgment. In that moment, I realized the futility of trying to defend myself, of trying to explain my side of the story to those who had only heard one version. The damage was done. My mother's words had painted me as the culprit, the son who had abandoned his family in their time of need. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew the weight of the guilt I had carried, the countless times I had replayed that night in my head, wondering if things could have been different if I had acted sooner. I also knew the pain of being pushed away, of being blamed for something beyond my control. It was a pain that had driven me to seek distance, to build a life away from the constant reminders of my supposed failures. As I stood there, amidst the whispered conversations and sideways glances, I realized that my mother's words, though hurtful, could not define me. They were a reflection of her grief, her inability to cope with the loss of her husband and the strained relationship with her son. It was a sadness that I shared, but I also knew that carrying the burden of her blame would not bring my father back, nor would it heal the rift between us. There I was, sitting on the porch of the funeral home, my tears falling silently. The weight of my mother's public accusation at the funeral had left me shattered, alone with my grief and the sting of her words. It felt as though the ground beneath me had opened up, swallowing the last remnants of what family meant to me. My aunt found me there, her presence a gentle reminder that I wasn't completely forsaken. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice soft, a stark contrast to the harshness I had just endured inside. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The dam broke and I told her everything. How my mother blamed me for my father's death, how she labeled me cruel and selfish in front of everyone. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered, the pain and confusion I had been carrying for so long finally finding an outlet. My aunt listened quietly, her expression one of sadness and understanding. When I finished, she sighed, a sound that carried so much, sorrow for her sister's actions and empathy for my situation. "Your mom is grieving and lashing out," she finally said. "But that doesn't excuse her words or how she's treated you." I then shared with her the story of the night my dad had fallen out of bed, the sound that had roused me from sleep, the horrifying discovery in the morning, and my frantic efforts to help. It was a confession of sorts, an attempt to explain my side, to make her see that I wasn't the villain my mother portrayed me to be. To my surprise, my aunt took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You are my new adopted son now," she declared, her words not just a statement but a promise, a pledge of support and acceptance that I hadn't realized I was so desperate for. "And your mother, she doesn't deserve you. Not if she can't see the truth and pain in your heart." Her words were a balm to my soul, offering a sliver of solace in the midst of my turmoil. Here was family, not bound by blood or obligation, but chosen, offering me a place when I felt I had nowhere left to turn. As we sat there, the cool evening air wrapping around us, I realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. My aunt's acceptance and understanding gave me something to hold on to, a glimmer of hope in a time darkened by loss and misunderstanding. It was a reminder that family isn't always about who raises you, but who stands by you when the ground gives way beneath your feet. In that moment I understood that while my relationship with my mother might never be repaired, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Life would go on, and with my aunt's support, I might just find a way to navigate this new reality. Despite the pain and heartbreak, her words offered a path forward, a chance to rebuild from the ruins left by my father's passing and my mother's blame.
Am I the jerk? My wife has cheated on me multiple times, but I have chosen to forgive her. After many years together, my wife wants to leave. She doesn't love me anymore and wants a fresh start with someone else, someone she thinks will be a better husband. She wants me to move out of our house, the one we built together for over 10 years, which includes raising our 8-year-old child. We've been married 10 years and have a sweet, well-behaved 8-year-old daughter. Everything felt great, good job, happy family until I found out my wife was seeing someone else. I was struggling with depression for a while and couldn't give her the love and attention she needed. This made her feel lonely, and she found comfort with someone else. It hurt a lot to realize I wasn't enough, especially when I was trying to get better in therapy. When we finally talked things out, it was a big fight. I was crying in church when her calls kept coming in, like constant reminders of the broken trust. At first, she denied everything, but the evidence on her phone was clear. There was no way around the truth, and it felt like our chance to fix things together was gone. Then, she finally admitted she was wrong. She cried and promised to end the affair and work on our marriage. I wanted to believe her, but it's hard to trust someone who betrayed you. A few weeks later, I suspected she was still seeing him, and my phone check confirmed it. My hope for a happy marriage disappeared. I was angry and disappointed. I packed my bags, ready to leave. But when I confronted her, she fell apart, crying, and even getting sick. Seeing her like that, I couldn't leave. I wish I had walked away angry instead of feeling sorry for her. Many sleepless nights later, I had a tough choice to make. Our 8-year-old daughter weighed heavily on my mind. Because of her, I decided to forgive my wife. It felt risky, but I hoped it would fix our broken marriage. It wasn't easy. I was still angry about the betrayal, which broke our trust. But seeing my innocent daughter caught in the middle made me sad. She deserved a happy home with loving parents, even if it meant I had to put my feelings aside for a while. Forgiving my wife doesn't mean I approve of what she did. It was a careful decision I made for our daughter's future. I know she hurt me, but I hope we can heal and make things better. The future is uncertain, and there could be problems we haven't thought of. But by forgiving her, I'm trying to make things work again. I really hope it's the right decision, and that our family can finally find peace and happiness. Things were getting better between me and my wife. I found out she'd been secretly talking to her old boyfriend, and it caused a lot of fighting and sadness. But we both wanted to fix our marriage, so we decided to try to trust each other again and fall back in love. One day I had to go on a work trip. I was supposed to be gone for a few days, but I finished my work early and came home sooner than planned. I was excited to surprise my wife and daughter. I imagined how happy they'd be to see me. I couldn't wait to be back home with my family. The house was creepy quiet when I opened the door. No answer came back when I called for them. It felt weird, like a big empty hole opened up in my chest, making me gasp for air. Every unanswered call for my wife echoed in the emptiness, adding to the growing fear in my gut. Finally, I found her in the bedroom. What I saw wasn't just a betrayal, it was like everything broke apart. My wife, all tangled in the sheets with another man, looked up at me, surprised. But there was something else in her eyes too. Maybe defiance, maybe begging silently, that made me feel sick again. The air itself seemed to crackle with tension. Hot, raw anger exploded inside me, fighting against the crushing feeling of loss. Our whole life together, all the whispered promises, the shared laughter. It all felt like a cruel trick compared to this. I wanted to scream, to rage, but a lump of despair stuck in my throat, taking away my voice. Right then, I was a mess of mixed up feelings. The burning pain of betrayal, the smothering weight of a broken heart, and the bitter taste of shame. It was like a scene from a terrible dream, a nightmare so real it felt like it would scar me forever. He stood up and left. I calmly walked towards her. She turned to look at me, and I saw the pain and guilt in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. She took a deep breath and began to tell me the truth. It turned out that she had never stopped seeing her ex-lover. She had lied to me about cutting off contact with him, and they had been meeting in secret all along. I felt like 1,000 knives were piercing my heart. The pain was unbearable. All the trust and hope that we had worked so hard to rebuild had been shattered in an instant. I didn't know what to say or do. I just stood there, frozen in shock and disbelief. Finally, I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was going or what I was going to do. I felt lost and alone, and I didn't know how I was going to face my wife and daughter again. Eventually, I pulled over to the side of the road and got out of the car. I stood there for a long time, staring out at the horizon. I left home for a month to deal with the pain of my broken trust. Every day felt like forever, filled with the constant ache of being betrayed and the silence of my wife's unanswered calls. Nights were even harder. I kept thinking about the good times we had, and I felt so unsure about what to do next. It felt like I was suffocating. I went to places that reminded me of our happy times, but it only made me feel worse. Everything seemed dull and lifeless, just like I felt inside. I tried to forget the pain by drinking a lot, but it didn't help. In the middle of all this sadness, I never stopped loving my family. I kept seeing my wife and daughter's happy faces in my mind. All the good we'd been through together felt more important than the betrayal. Suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I had to go home. Not because I thought everything would be okay right away, but because I was determined to face the situation head on. As I pulled into the driveway, my stomach tightened up. Our house, once a place of comfort and laughter, now felt tense and scary. When I opened the door, I saw her. Her eyes showed all the confusion and worry she was feeling. She wanted to say something, maybe apologize, but neither of us spoke. But in that silence, I knew what I was going to do. I looked into her eyes and saw the fear and uncertainty. She was waiting for me to tell her that I was leaving her. But I didn't say anything. I just took her in my arms and held her. We stood there for a long time, holding each other. I didn't know what the future held, But I knew that I was going to face it with my wife by my side. That winter, I had to go on a business trip for 3 months. The biting cold of winter seemed to seep into my soul, making me miss my little family even more. Darkness enveloped the house when I returned, giving me a creepy, scared feeling. The scene before my eyes was like a reenactment of the horrific memory from that year. The haunting fear of my wife's betrayal came flooding back, making me panic and choke up. I called out to my wife and daughter, but there was no answer. The house was shrouded in darkness, eerily silent. With heavy steps that felt like they were carrying the weight of the world, I walked up the stairs. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the bedroom door. And the sight that greeted me made me choke with emotion. My wife and daughter were sleeping soundly on the bed, their faces serene and peaceful. The soft glow of the nightlight added to the warm atmosphere of the room. The road to forgiveness is long and challenging, but it is possible. We are committed to making our marriage work, and we are confident that we can overcome this obstacle. We are stronger together, and we will get through this together. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I slept with my wife's sister. Have we ruined our family? But the most surprising thing is my mother-in-law's attitude. What a shame. I'm Alex, 28 years old, and I've been living in a haze since my wife Sarah passed away from cancer 2 years ago. We met when we were just 15, and she was not only my partner but my best friend. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself, and not a day goes by that I don't miss her deeply. Life has been tough without Sarah. Most days I feel like I'm just going through the motions, trying to keep up with my job at the local bank, where we both started working right out of college. It's a place full of memories, as Sarah used to drop by my office to have lunch together. Now lunchtimes are the hardest part of my day. I often find myself eating alone at my desk, avoiding the break room where we used to laugh and share our plans for the future. I've been dealing with a lot of depression since she died. It's like a cloud that hangs over everything I do. I struggle with feeling motivated to see friends or pursue hobbies we used to enjoy together. I know I should try to connect with people, but it's hard. It feels like there's this wall between me and the rest of the world. The loneliness is palpable. Even when I'm around others, there's a solitude that doesn't quite go away. I used to find comfort in our shared home, but now it feels too quiet, filled with reminders of her everywhere I look. Her books on the shelves, her gardening tools in the backyard, her coat still hanging by the door. It all brings back so many memories. Since Sarah passed away, my life has felt incredibly empty, but there's been one constant that has helped me keep it together. Emily, Sarah's younger sister. We've always been friendly, but we became truly close after Sarah's death. Our relationship is based purely on friendship, and the mutual loss we feel. Emily has been more than just a sister-in-law. She's been a rock for me in these turbulent times. We started spending more time together because it seemed like we were the only two who could truly understand the depth of each other's grief. Our get-togethers are usually simple. Watching TV, talking, sometimes just sitting in silence, each lost in our own memories of Sarah. These moments mean a lot to me because Emily never pushes me to move on, or get over the loss. She knows, as I do, that this is not something you get over. It's something you learn to live with. Emily has been key in keeping me connected to life, inviting me over for dinner, making sure I'm not always alone. We talk almost daily, checking in on each other, sharing how our days went. It's comforting to have someone who understands the significance of a particularly hard day or the anniversary of a special moment I shared with Sarah. There's nothing romantic in our relationship. It's a deep familial bond forged through shared pain and the love we both had for Sarah. My relationship with Sarah's parents has also grown stronger since her passing. They've been incredible, reaching out to make sure I'm not just wallowing in my grief alone. Since I lost my own parents in high school, Sarah's parents have stepped into that void somewhat, and this has only intensified since we lost Sarah. They invite me to family gatherings and make it a point to include me in all major family decisions, just as they would their own son. These interactions are a balm to the loneliness that tries to engulf me. Family dinners at their house are often bittersweet. I see so much of Sarah in them, in her mother's smile, in her father's hearty laugh, and sometimes, it's both comforting and heart-wrenching. They share stories about Sarah, keeping her memory alive, and it helps me feel like I'm still part of the family, not just someone who was briefly connected to them through marriage. They often tell me how grateful they are that I'm part of their lives, that I keep Sarah's memory alive as much as they do. It's a mutual support system that works because there's an unspoken understanding of the loss we all share. They've never made me feel like an outsider. Instead, they've doubled down on making sure I know I'm still family. This has been crucial in helping me maintain a sense of belonging and stability. At times I feel guilty for the support I receive, wondering if I deserve it. But Sarah's family has never wavered in their kindness. I try to give back by being there for them as well, helping around the house, fixing things, being a part of celebrations and helping them navigate the world without Sarah. Navigating these relationships has been one of the few things that has helped make my world feel slightly normal again. I am incredibly grateful for Emily and for Sarah's parents. Their continued presence and support have been some of the most stabilizing elements during the worst times of my life. We've grown together in our grief, finding new ways to connect and support each other, and I don't know where I'd be without them. It was a regular Friday night and Emily had invited me over, as she often did, for some pizza and a couple of beers. It was supposed to be a relaxed evening, just another one of our regular hangouts. We settled in, with the TV playing in the background, talking about our week at work, venting frustrations and sharing small victories. These evenings had become a cornerstone of my new normal, and I valued them more than I could express. As the night progressed, we ended up talking about Sarah, as we often did. But that night, the conversation took a deeper, more emotional turn. We shared memories, some that made us laugh, and others that brought tears to our eyes. The mix of alcohol and the heavy emotion lowered my guards and heightened my feelings of loneliness and longing for a connection. Before I knew it, the atmosphere changed. There was a silence, a kind of charged silence that I hadn't experienced with Emily before. We looked at each other, and in a moment that seemed both fleeting and stretched out, we kissed. It wasn't planned or thought through, and as soon as it happened, it led to more. We ended up sleeping together and without a condom. It wasn't until it was all over that the gravity of what had just happened began to sink in. The immediate rush of guilt was overwhelming. I felt sick to my stomach, not from the beer, but from a deep sense of betrayal. What had I done? I had just betrayed Sarah's memory, the love of my life, with her own sister. The guilt washed over me in waves, each one stronger than the last. How could I face her family after this? How could I look Emily in the eyes knowing what we had done? I felt disgusted, completely disgusted with myself. The self-loathing was immense. I couldn't believe I had allowed myself to be in that situation, to cross a line I never even imagined approaching. The night was supposed to be about healing and support, and it turned into something that made me feel like I was undoing all the respect and love I had for my late wife. The confusion was just as bad as the guilt. Part of me wondered if this meant something more, if there was something with Emily beyond shared grief and friendship. But these thoughts only deepened the guilt, making me feel even worse. I was supposed to be the one who held it all together, who respected the boundaries of our relationship. Instead, I had just complicated everything in an unimaginable way. After Emily fell asleep, I lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how everything had gone so wrong. The joy and comfort that these visits usually brought were replaced by a churning mess of regret and fear. What would happen when Emily woke up? What would this mean for our relationship? For my relationship with her family? I knew I had to leave before we had to face each other in the light of day. Early in the morning, I quietly got my things together, left a note saying I needed some time to think, and left. The drive home was one of the longest of my life, each mile a reminder of how far I had strayed from the man I wanted to be. As I drove, the reality of the situation began to fully settle in. I had jeopardized everything about my relationship with Emily, her family, and the memory of Sarah. I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross, and now I had to face whatever came next, no matter how much I dreaded it. 2 days after that night, Emily called. She asked if we could meet and talk about what happened. My stomach churned with anxiety, but I knew this conversation was inevitable. We decided to meet at a local park, a neutral place away from the memories of our homes. Sitting on a park bench, the early spring breeze did little to ease the tension. Emily was the first to break the silence. She apologized the other night, admitting that she had been harboring feelings for me for over a year. She confessed that her feelings had grown from our closeness, the comfort we found in each other, and the shared grief. Hearing her say this was jarring. I had never considered our relationship in a romantic light. It had always been built on the foundation of friendship and mutual loss. Emily continued, explaining that she had struggled with these feelings, unsure of whether to disclose them, fearing it might ruin the support system we had created. As she spoke, my mind raced. Part of me felt betrayed. How could she develop these feelings under the circumstances? Another part of me felt a deep empathy for her, understanding the complexity of human emotions, especially in times of grief. It was a tumultuous mix of shock, confusion, and a strange sense of clarity. I told her I needed to process everything. The guilt of betraying Sarah was overwhelming, and now, Emily's confession added another layer of complexity. I was still deeply in love with Sarah, clinging to her memory as my moral compass, and any thought of moving on felt like a betrayal. Emily listened quietly as I expressed my turmoil. I explained how conflicted I felt, torn between the loyalty to my late wife and the undeniable connection that had formed between us. I told her about my fear of losing not just Sarah's memory but also the family I had come to see as my own. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with understanding and sadness. She assured me that she didn't expect anything from me, that she valued our friendship above all, and would hate to lose that. She suggested we take some time apart to think about everything, to figure out where we stood individually and what we wanted moving forward. As we parted ways that day, the air between us was filled with a heavy mix of understanding and uncertainty. The walk back to my car felt longer than usual, each step weighed down by the gravity of our conversation. I was confused about my feelings, unsure about the right path forward, and scared of the potential fallout from our actions. Over the next few days, I did a lot of soul-searching. I thought about Sarah, and how much she had shaped my life. I grappled with the guilt of even considering a future where I could be happy with someone else, especially Emily. Yet there was a part of me that couldn't deny the warmth and happiness I felt when I was with Emily. How natural it felt despite the circumstances. I realized that my feelings were more complicated than I had admitted. Emily was no longer just Sarah's sister to me, she had become someone very important, someone who brought light into my life in a time of pervasive darkness. But was it right to explore these feelings? Could I ever move past the guilt and honor Sarah's memory without feeling like I was replacing her? These questions haunted me, each one echoing Sarah's absence and the profound impact she had on my life. I knew I couldn't rush these feelings or the decisions they prompted. The days following my conversation with Emily were some of the most challenging I had ever faced. My emotions were a tangled mess, and despite Emily's reassurances, I felt isolated in my turmoil. My feelings for Emily were becoming harder to ignore, yet every moment of happiness or connection I felt with her was immediately overshadowed by guilt and a deep-seated fear of betraying Sarah's memory. Emily continued to be incredibly supportive during this time. She gave me the space I needed but was always just a phone call away if I needed to talk. This only made things more complicated. Her understanding and patience were qualities that made me admire her even more, which in turn intensified my feelings of confusion and guilt. As I struggled internally, I also grappled with how to handle the situation with Sarah's parents. They had become my family, in every sense, since losing my own parents in high school. The thought of losing their trust and affection terrified me. They had embraced me as a son, and now I was at risk of betraying that familial bond. The idea of them looking at me with disappointment or, worse, disgust, was unbearable. One evening, as I sat alone at home, flipping through an old photo album that Sarah and I had put together, I felt an overwhelming urge to talk to someone who might understand. I considered confiding in Sarah's mother, who had always been kind and motherly towards me. We had shared many heartfelt conversations about Sarah, and she had offered wisdom and comfort in my darkest times. The moral dilemma of whether to reveal the truth to her was agonizing. On one hand, telling her could shatter the image she had of me, potentially destroying the family dynamics. On the other, the weight of keeping such a secret felt dishonest, especially in a relationship built on mutual respect and openness. I wrestled with these thoughts for hours, the photo album open on my lap, Sarah's smiling face looking up at me, a silent reminder of the life we had shared. One particularly difficult day, I decided to visit Sarah's grave. I spoke to her as I often did, telling her about my confusion and seeking some sign or guidance. "What should I do, Sarah?" I asked aloud, hoping for clarity. The cemetery was quiet, the peacefulness both comforting and haunting. As I stood there, the reality of moving on seemed both necessary and impossible. A few days later, I made up my mind to talk to Sarah's mother. I invited her out for a coffee, a neutral place where we could talk openly. As we sat across from each other, the familiar warmth in her eyes made the words catch in my throat. But I had come this far. I couldn't back out now. I started by expressing how much her family meant to me, how they had filled the void my own parents left. Then, I cautiously broached the subject of Emily and me. I explained everything, from the night it happened to the emotional aftermath and how conflicted I felt. I emphasized that it wasn't something either of us had planned or anticipated, and how much I valued the family and didn't want to lose them. "Alex," she said gently, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I won't pretend that I'm not disappointed, but I understand that grief can make us do things we might not otherwise consider. It doesn't excuse it, but it does explain it." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes not leaving mine, ensuring I understood the gravity of her words. "You're right. You did betray the trust we had in you. But I also know you loved Sarah deeply, and I believe you still do." Her calmness was unnerving, but also a testament to the kind of person she was: compassionate, understanding, yet straightforward. "What happens now?" she asked, her tone implying that while forgiveness was possible, the path forward wasn't clear. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling a mix of relief and increased anxiety. I need to figure out what this means for me and Emily. I don't want to cause more pain. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. And Emily? How does she feel about all of this? She's confused too. We both are, I replied. She expressed feelings for me that go beyond just caring as friends or family. We haven't figured out what this means for us yet, or if there's even an us to consider. That's honest, she acknowledged. And honesty will be crucial moving forward. You both need to think carefully about your next steps. Not just for your own sake but for everyone who cares about you both. Her response was a relief, but it didn't erase the complexity of the situation. She promised to keep the conversation between us until we figured out how to move forward. As we parted ways, she hugged me tightly, a gesture that spoke volumes about her forgiveness and understanding. After the confrontation with Sarah's mother, I was left to navigate a new reality. The confession had opened up a dialogue, but it also left many questions unanswered about what the future would hold for me, for Emily, and for our extended family. The potential paths forward were uncertain and fraught with emotional pitfalls. The following weeks were a time of deep reflection and careful interaction. I spent a lot of time thinking about what it meant to honor Sarah's memory while acknowledging my evolving feelings for Emily. I wrestled with my sense of loyalty to Sarah, questioning whether moving forward with Emily would be a betrayal or a testament to the complex ways in which the heart heals and adapts. I decided that any step towards a possible relationship with Emily would need to be taken with transparency and respect for all involved. We agreed to start seeing a therapist together to navigate our feelings in a structured environment that would help us understand whether we were seeking comfort in each other out of shared grief or if our feelings were building towards a genuine relationship. At the same time, I made a commitment to maintain open communication with Sarah's parents. I wanted to ensure that they never felt blindsided by my actions again. Their acceptance of my mistakes provided a foundation on which to rebuild trust, but I knew it would take time and consistent effort to fully restore what had been damaged. The possibility of rejection from other family members loomed large. I understood that not everyone might be as understanding as Sarah's mother had been. Preparing for that rejection was painful but necessary. I had to accept that my actions might lead to permanent changes in how some family members viewed me, regardless of the outcome with Emily. In my reflections, I also considered the themes of loyalty, love, and loss. Loyalty to Sarah had initially made me feel that any new love would be a betrayal, but I gradually began to see that Sarah would have wanted me to find happiness again. Love, I realized, wasn't finite. The love I had for Sarah would always be a part of me, but it didn't preclude the possibility of experiencing love again in a different form. Dealing with loss had taught me that life was about moving forward, not moving on. Moving forward meant carrying Sarah's memory with me into any new relationships, honoring her by living fully, rather than remaining anchored in the past. Emily and I took things slowly. Our shared history, filled with both deep loss and emerging affection, required us to be patient and gentle with ourselves and each other. We were learning that caring for someone new didn't diminish the love we had for Sarah. Rather, it expanded our capacity to love and experience life's complexities. As months turned into a year, the dynamics within the family had adjusted. Some relatives were supportive, understanding that life had to go on and acknowledging the sincerity of our intentions. Others were more distant, perhaps needing more time to come to terms with the changes. I respected their feelings, knowing that healing and acceptance come at different times for everyone. Looking forward, I am cautiously optimistic. The path Emily and I are on is not without its challenges, but it is one we are choosing consciously, with the blessings of those closest to us. The therapy sessions have been instrumental in helping us understand our motivations and feelings, ensuring that our relationship is built on a solid foundation of respect, love, and mutual support. I am determined to live a life that honors all the love I've experienced, the love I've lost, and the new love I am cautiously embracing. Sarah's memory remains a beacon for me, guiding my actions and decisions, a reminder of the preciousness of time and the importance of living with integrity and compassion. Moving forward, my life is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the complexity of emotions, and the infinite capacity of the heart to heal and love again. The journey isn't simple or straightforward, but it is filled with the potential for growth, understanding, and the continuation of a life that honors both past and future loves. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My husband got a paternity test on our daughter and it came back negative, but I never cheated. Now he thinks our relationship is a lie and wants to divorce. What do I do? I'm 29 years old and my husband is 31 years old. We have a 5-year-old daughter, but this morning, my husband confronted me with the shocking accusation that our daughter isn't biologically his, based on a failed paternity test. The accusation is unfounded because I have never cheated on him. Since that moment, I haven't been able to stop crying. I am devastated and bewildered because I never strayed from our marriage vows. My husband and I have been together since college. He is the love of my life. He's always been so kind and handsome. While I have been with 2 other people, it was before we got together, and there is no one else who could possibly be the father of our daughter. The result was negative, which he took as proof of my infidelity. But this is impossible. I have never strayed from our marriage. We were married and actively trying to conceive when I became pregnant. I would never, ever cheat on him. I don't know why he decided to take that test, but it came back negative, and now he doubts he's our daughter's father. It's true that I've been with others before him, but that was well in the past, before our life together began, and certainly before our daughter was conceived. We were happily married and trying for a baby when I became pregnant. There's no one else who could be her father. I am at a loss for how to convince him that the test was faulty. I don't understand what prompted him to take this paternity test, but its results have shattered the peace of our home. How do I convince him of its inaccuracy when the science he trusts tells him otherwise? This fear is consuming me. In recent months, he has become a completely different person from the man I married. He has grown cold and suspicious, often demanding to see my phone without explaining why. Initially, I showed him my phone, but after repeated demands, I told him I wouldn't comply unless he gave me a reason. His behavior has also changed towards our daughter. He has become distant and spends hours secluded in his office. I have no idea what he is doing there. This morning, he accused me of infidelity, saying he took the test after realizing our daughter's brown eyes couldn't come from us, as we both have blue eyes. He then demanded that I leave the house. I refused to leave, so he locked me out of our bedroom. Now, I'm in my daughter's room, feeling terrified and unsure of what to do next. Rebuilding our relationship will require patience, understanding, and a lot of hard work, but I am committed to making things right. I cannot let this misunderstanding tear apart what we have spent years building. My priority is to protect our daughter from the fallout and repair the bond with the man who, despite everything, remains the love of my life. What should I do? Edit. As I sit here reflecting on the tumultuous events of today, my heart is heavy with a mixture of fear and hope. This morning's confrontation with my husband about the paternity of our daughter was a shock that left me reeling. He accused me of infidelity based on a paternity test result that claimed he was not our daughter's biological father. I know this isn't true. I have never been unfaithful, and I need to find a way to prove my innocence and restore the trust in our marriage. The specific advice I'm seeking is how to demonstrate my innocence convincingly, and what steps I can take to ensure our relationship survives this ordeal. My primary goal is to keep our family together, no matter the cost. After hours of distress, my husband finally emerged from our bedroom, and we managed to have a brief conversation. I reiterated my fidelity, emphasizing that I had never cheated on him. In an attempt to be proactive, I began to discuss a list of additional tests I wanted to undergo to confirm the faulty nature of the initial test. However, he was not ready to delve into those details, asking to postpone our discussion until tomorrow. Despite the strained atmosphere, he reassured me that his love for our daughter remains unchanged, and that he would not bar me from our house or bedroom. At the end of our conversation, I asked him for a hug, which he gave, but my anxiety about convincing him of the truth lingers. Moving forward, I know that simply stating my innocence is not enough. I must be strategic and empathetic in handling this delicate situation. Firstly, I plan to arrange for a second paternity test through a different, highly reputable laboratory to ensure the accuracy of the results. This step is crucial not only to prove my fidelity, but also to eliminate any doubts about our daughter's lineage. Secondly, I need to consider the emotional toll this situation has taken on my husband. His sudden change in behavior and the development of suspicion could be symptoms of deeper issues. Perhaps the stress of fatherhood, or latent insecurities, have surfaced in harmful ways. I will suggest couples therapy as a safe space for us to explore these feelings with a professional. It will also demonstrate my commitment to repairing our relationship and understanding his fears. In the meantime, maintaining open and honest communication is vital. I plan to encourage my husband to express his fears and doubts, promising to listen without judgment. This approach will hopefully foster empathy and understanding between us. I also recognize the importance of patience and compassion during this time. Being a good wife in this situation means supporting my husband's emotional needs, even as I deal with my own turmoil. I will make an effort to be more attentive, to spend quality time together, and to reassure him of my love and commitment to our family. As we prepare for our detailed conversation tomorrow, I am gathering all possible evidence and information that supports my case. This includes medical records, timelines, and potential witnesses like close friends or family who can vouch for my character and our relationship's history. In essence, proving my innocence is not just about presenting factual evidence, but also about rebuilding the trust and intimacy that seemed to have frayed in our marriage. I am committed to doing whatever it takes to heal our relationship and restore our family's harmony. My hope is that through open dialogue, professional guidance, and a commitment to understanding each other's perspectives, we can overcome this challenge and emerge stronger as a couple. Update. Hi everyone. First off, I want to express my gratitude to everyone who reached out after my original post. The overwhelming amount of attention it received was more than I could have ever anticipated, and while it was hard to respond to everyone, I greatly appreciate the support and advice. With that, I crafted a list of plans and additional tests to help us resolve this bewildering situation. Initially, my husband was understandably distrustful. The tension between us was palpable, and his skepticism hurt deeply. However, he recently apologized for his reactions and assured me that he would never attempt to kick me out of our home. He did express, in no uncertain terms, that if further tests showed I had cheated, he would take drastic actions, or as he put it, go scorched earth. This fear loomed large over us as we awaited the results. Initially, my husband was understandably distrustful. The tension between us was palpable, and his skepticism hurt deeply. However, he recently apologized for his reactions and assured me that he would never attempt to kick me out of our home. He did express, in no uncertain terms, that if further tests showed I had cheated, he would take drastic actions, or as he put it, go scorched earth. This fear loomed large over us as we awaited the results. We proceeded with a series of tests, including blood paternity tests for both him, myself, and our daughter. Additionally, we had scheduled an appointment with a chimerism specialist, which was later cancelled because of an unforeseen and shocking revelation. Chimerism specialist in this sentence refers to a specialist in chimerism. Begenic chimerism, or chimerism, is a biological phenomenon in which an organism contains cells with two different genes. In the case of humans and animals, this means that an individual is created from two or more embryos, which may include possessing blood cells of different blood types, and more subtle changes in form, phenotype. This indicator is usually invisible to the naked eye, however, it has been detected during the process of proving paternity. An expert specializing in chimerism will help analyze, understand and provide solutions to this problem. As some of you astutely guessed, it turns out that our daughter is not biologically mine either. We are stunned. A police officer came to our house to take our statements, and we are now in the process of suing the hospital where I gave birth. The thought of not knowing what happened to my biological daughter is terrifying. Since this discovery, my husband and I have been trying to support each other through this upheaval. Our relationship, though strained, has found new grounding in this shared crisis. Despite the rekindled trust and support between us, my whole world feels like it has been turned upside down. I found solace in staying close to our daughter, sleeping in her room, clinging to the bond we've built over the years, even as I'm haunted by the fear that she might be taken from us. Yet there's a part of me desperate to know if my biological daughter is safe and well. Our daughter remains unaware of the specifics of the situation, and we've been doing everything possible to keep this quiet. The last thing we want is for this to turn into a public scandal. I don't want people who know us to look at her differently. She deserves better than that. She's such a good kid, and she's not some spectacle to be gawked at. The possibility of finding her biological family looms large. If by some chance we do, I can't even begin to imagine how we will navigate such a complex situation. Part of me dreams of a scenario where we could all live together in a larger home, blending our families harmoniously. However, I'm painfully aware of the financial and emotional challenges such an arrangement would entail, not to mention whether it's even feasible or if the other family would be amenable to it. This whole situation is crazy. I don't know anyone else who's been in a situation like this. I mean, are there support groups for parents of kids who got mixed up? I googled, and nothing came up. Literally all I'm getting are tabloid articles from trashy magazines that slap the faces of innocent kids on the same pages as celebrity sex scandals and fiction. I've tried looking for support groups for parents in similar situations, but my searches have come up empty. All I find are sensationalized tabloid stories, which only add to the frustration and helplessness I feel. How do we even begin to explain this to our daughter? The timing needs to be carefully considered. She's too young to keep such a heavy secret, and if told prematurely, it could inadvertently become public knowledge through schoolyard conversations. This ordeal has left me questioning what I could have possibly done to deserve such a fate. Yet, through it all, the support from my husband and the love for our daughter keep me anchored. I am determined to resolve this, no matter how daunting the path may seem. Thank you again for your ongoing support. It means the world to us during this incredibly difficult time. But I don't know what I ever did to deserve this. Additional, my husband saw my post. Hello everyone. First I need to share something rather unexpected that's added another layer to our already complicated situation. A YouTuber named Narrations, whom my husband follows, decided to feature my original post on his channel. Naturally, my husband recognized our story immediately. How could he not? It's not exactly a common scenario. After hearing our private turmoil narrated for all to hear, curiosity led him to my account page, where he stumbled upon numerous comments that were far from flattering about him. Understandably hurt, he has asked for a chance to share his perspective here, hoping it might clarify things and perhaps reduce the backlash he's been facing. Please, let's give him that chance and approach his words with kindness. Now from my husband. I know many of you have been through the ringer of self-doubt and seen where that dark path can lead. It's hardly a place of logic or reason, especially not when you have swathes of the internet echoing the worst about your life, that your wife is cheating, plotting to take everything from you, and has never loved you. It's even tougher when you've always felt a bit unworthy, like she's too good for you, which only feeds into every doubt. The descent began with COVID. I gained weight, felt depressed, and I stopped recognizing myself. Meanwhile, my wife remained vibrant, seemingly unscathed by the chaos around us. I feared that she regretted her choice in being with me. Then, I fell into some online communities that weren't exactly uplifting. Places brimming with stories of betrayal and loss. When someone shared how a child's differing eye color led to uncovering an affair, it struck a nerve. I panicked, fearing the worst about our daughter's brown eyes versus our blue. The online consensus was clear and dire: she was cheating. I made a post about my fears and was advised to stealthily confirm my suspicions through a paternity test, cautioning that confronting her could lead her to cover tracks or gain an upper hand in an imagined divorce. When the test came back stating I wasn't the father, I was devastated. I didn't want to believe it, but the confirmation of a second test broke me. My actions were driven by pain and fear. I didn't want to end up like so many men I read about. If you've ever been cheated on, you know what it feels like. When my wife denied it, I got angrier. I just wanted her to leave. I didn't want to go through what everyone seemed to think was going to happen. I didn't want to lose custody of my kid. I didn't want to lose my house. I was scared, and angry, and I wanted the truth. I felt like if she couldn't even be honest, there was no getting past this. I took a few hours to calm down. I pushed her away because I couldn't bear the thought of going through what seemed like an inevitable loss of my family and home. When she approached me later with a rational plan for more tests, I realized how far I had let my fear drive me. I'm not trying to excuse my behavior. I know it caused immense pain. I snapped under pressure, under the weight of a narrative I constructed from online voices and my insecurities. But learning our daughter might not be biologically related to either of us was never a scenario I had considered. This revelation has been as shocking to me as it has been to her. And it's me again, back to close this out. I want to underscore that my husband isn't the monster some have made him out to be. He isn't also an abuser. He's a man who found himself lost in a sea of his darkest thoughts and fears, amplified by voices from hidden corners of the internet. And while he refers to himself as having gotten fat, that's not the fact I see. I do not agree that he's fat. I love this man very much and have for ages, and we are not going to let this situation break our marriage. In order to prevent this experience from destroying the life we've created, we are navigating these turbulent waters together. We are incredibly appreciative of your help and guidance, which has been essential. We are grateful for your support in preserving our family, which is what really counts. Thank you to everyone for all your help. From my perspective on everything, having an historic Korean drama tells the story of a birth exchange. It concerned two girls, one from an affluent family and the other from a destitute one. At the time, and perhaps later, it became well known outside of Korea. It was quite popular. Additionally, two real newborn girls who were switched at birth are the subject of an episode of This American Life. Aside from the fact that it is a true event, the main distinction is that one of the families was aware that the babies had been switched but chose to remain silent. Initially, he didn't share his fears with his wife, choosing instead to conduct the paternity tests secretly. This approach, suggested by online commentators, was supposed to protect him but only ended up driving a wedge between them. When the results suggested he was not the biological father, his actions were guided by the fear of losing his family and assets, a common theme in the stories he was exposed to online. His behavior included distancing himself from his wife and even locking her out of their bedroom, actions that were drastic and almost reflexive given his mental state at the time. The emotional toll on the wife was significant, having to defend her fidelity while also dealing with the shocking claims about their daughter's paternity. The situation took a turn when it was revealed that their daughter might not be biologically related to either of them, suggesting a mix-up at the hospital. This new revelation shifted the narrative from infidelity to a tragic error, possibly involving switched babies at birth. Yes, it is the main problem. They want to keep the child you raised and desire their biological child. I get that. But is it really not possible for them to have both? Moving them in was the best option. The girls have to have the freedom to come and go. It covered a plethora of other topics as well. Daphne's biological parents' ignorance about the deaf community. It was difficult for Daphne to identify because, although genetically not Puerto Rican, she was raised as one. I was told as a child that I was too gypsy to be white but too white to be gypsy, so it was obviously related. The only one who truly recognizes when Bae is struggling is Daphne, because she needs to practically beg for attention. The way they argue in the beginning until it becomes clear that nobody else understands how estranged they feel as a result of everything. The assigning of blame. In addition to blaming them for not realizing Bae wasn't theirs, Bae's biological mother is also held accountable for Daphne's deafness due to meningitis as a toddler. And really shows the journey they took together to become one big family that does encourage the girls to speak to whichever of the four parents they need in that moment instead of feeling like they're playing favorites and betraying the others. His case underlines the dangers of letting fear and external advice dictate one's actions without direct communication. The husband's initial failure to discuss his insecurities and fears openly with his wife exacerbated the situation, demonstrating how crucial transparency and trust are in a relationship. The couple's decision to confront the issue together, seeking further tests and legal advice, shows a pathway to recovering and rebuilding their relationship, highlighting the importance of unity in facing life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.